So to start you guys off on Nekron itself, if you don't know who he is, Nekron is essentially, especially as we find out earlier on within the context of his story, Nekron was a being who just simply seemed outside of our verse and caused this huge event called the Blackest Night event that had been prophesized within the Green Lantern lore for quite some time. And of course, this is obviously a really dumbed down, simplified version of essentially what went on. But the problem was, we never really got a lot of clarification of where he existed cosmologically or anything. And that actually has changed recently, but we'll get there. So I'm going to review kind of like the general idea of how powerful Nekron was in terms of how he used to be and all the appearances we had seen of him up into Green Lanterns during Rebirth, which was his last showing, and versus to this new information we got and how much more extreme things have gotten with Nekron scaling as time has gone on. So, to just generally discuss Nekron, what is Nekron? Well, Nekron is quite literally the darkness that existed before the light came. And light in this context is the idea of the light being the white entity or the white light, the traveler itself, something that blinded everything that existed here. Now, something that's noted here is Nekron's referencing it coming when this verse was first formed. He was darkness itself, gained sentience that existed, and he's kind of really specified to be older than existence, and kind of beefs with obviously the life entity, as well as can summon it. And he gets really triggered whenever people cheat death. We know that that's something like all things that are consistent with this character. Now, something else that is also really significant to consider for his character is he actually he can't be in our home verse without a tie to the verse, and that tie takes place of like an avatar of conceptual death. And in this case, in our Earth Zero's case, it was Black Hand itself. And so technically Black Hand is the concept of death, but Black Hand still draws his power from Nekron. And keep in mind, emotions in DC scale all the way out to the source wall. So that's kind of what we knew about Nekron. Now, what all has Nekron done? Well, I tell you what, let's talk about some stuff that, like, he just tanked. He just did not care about it. Because, canonically, he was never defeated in a physical fight. And that's really important to consider. He looks at characters like Cyborg Superman as not relevant. Like, he didn't even budge while Cyborg Superman was attacking him. He couldn't be relevant against Nekron. So it's just one of those things where, like, your average characters are not going to be able to fight him. So not even attacks from White Lantern Sinestro, considered to be the greatest lantern of all time, can harm him. No matter how much he damages him, he'll just tank the attacks. He can always come back no matter what. And it doesn't matter whether he has backup as well, because he also tanked an entire attack from the Crayola Corps, as well as fighting that version of Sinestro as well. Like, his power is so ridiculous that when he empowered Black Hand, it took the entire White Lantern Justice League just to start to affect Black Hand. Even without a tether to our reality, like Black Hand, as aforementioned, he can tank attacks from the Anti-Monitor, which is really insane to think about. Because the Anti-Monitor, as of 2018's lore, exists out in the Overvoid. He's like Overvoid material, or what we would now consider like the Omniverse. He's a being that exists of that stature, and this Darkseid later on beats up like our more classic Darkseid too. So all really important things to consider. Nekron isn't singular in nature, so you can't just like murder him because he exists everywhere. The only way they could actually deal with Black Hand, as I said earlier, was just revive or the only way they could deal with Nekron earlier was they could just revive Black Hand to life, and that removed his tether to our reality. And this wasn't something that was like an easy feat by any means either. It took the collective force of the life entity possessing the entire Justice League, as well as any other nearby lanterns, and specifically the life entity resummoning itself and funneling its energies directly through Black Hand in order to disrupt that tether that Nekron had over our reality. So in terms of like durability, what he can tank is pretty unbelievable, especially since we have other scans saying your Lord's power, and keep in mind, in reference here, he's referring to Spectre, and Spectre's Lord in this case would be the Presence. His power just doesn't affect Nekron. And his magic are just ineffectual. And if his magics are ineffectual against Nekron, then what exactly does that say about anybody who exists within the Source Wall? Like, no one has a chance of contending with like Nekron in terms of an actual battle, unless it's like one of the 7 foundational forces of creation that we learned about in like 2018's run, one of which being specifically the life entity, or the emotional spectrum as a totality. So you're probably thinking, well, it sounds like he can take a punch, but like, what the hell's he done so far in terms of just like raw AP, man? Like who can he fuck up? Like, what can he do? Like hacks wise, or maybe in terms of like his scythe, you know, because he carries around this scythe. All right, well, to give you an idea, just being on the planet, he affected the entire concept of the green. To give you a clue, the green is a multiversal entity that scales across all of the verse. So that's insane. He quite literally infected Swamp Thing and converted him, even though he like didn't have a Black Lantern ring on or anything. He can physically drag characters that are wildly powerful, like White Lantern, Sinestro, directly to him. He can passively corrupt the entire planet's souls, which includes like our planet as well as Zanshi's specifically. He can resurrect dead planets and store power in them. He controls all of the Black Lanterns that exist, and keep in mind, the Black Lanterns are anybody who has an emotional tether to somebody dead, resurrecting. So, I mean, that's pretty wacky. That includes anyone from anywhere in the entire verse. He has mind hacks that can affect everyone, including Guardian level characters. He can casually banish the Spectre back to his home, like realm or domain, and not have to care about any of his abilities because he does not have a soul to judge, and thus he's completely resistant to the Spectre's powers. He can affect, like, to give you an idea of how many dead people he can affect, man. Like, look at these numbers. Look at these numbers, bro. This is crazy in a singular day. He manages to separate Sinestro from the White Lantern, implying that he can remove concepts that empower you from you. He directly has telepathy to all of those that worship him or utilize his power, that being death. He has like control over you if you've been dead before at any point in time. So he basically, if you've died, he can just dead you again. So if you've ever revived, that works against you. Nekron is connected to all death and is all death, kind of how more reinforcement come on what I said earlier. He can seal away characters like the Anti-Monitor and turn them into power sources as well within the verse for him to utilize. Because keep in mind, he's still like forcibly connected from this faraway place that we're just not sure exactly of where that is, at least currently. And yeah, it's he can contain him like down the road too. And as you saw, obviously he can tank his attacks as well. So for a long time, people were really kind of unsure of what to do with Nekron. They were just like, oh, well, he's just God Sphere. He's like, yeah, because, I mean, he's a conceptual entity. Yeah, he's just like God Sphere somewhere. And I don't know. I argued that for a long time. I was like, dude, that's like straight up fucking crazy. Because, I mean, if he's God Sphere, he's shitting on everyone in the God Sphere. Like, pretty casually. Like, he gives no fucks. And nobody ever could, like, genuinely fight him and win the fight that they had with him. They just had to alive Black Hand, his tether to this reality. But why would he have to have a tether to this reality? That's something that like really confuses me, and the fact that that has to be an emotional entity seems really weird, especially the way emotional entities scale. And this new scaling that we have going on, we get a little bit more context as to exactly what all of that means. Because I made an argument for a long time that logically it would make sense for Nekron to have been coming from outside the source wall. And the reason for that is he would need a tether to this reality for some reason. Like, why, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And he pretty much beat up everyone who was on the inside of the source wall. Like, everyone bent the knee to him, essentially. So, it seemed really odd to me. But, man, Infinite Frontier 5 and 6 dropped. And boy, is it big news. So, we essentially find out that Darkseid has unified into his new ultimate form, which is the combination of all of his prior forms, and he's now like in his ultimate being. And so he's the most powerful he's ever possibly been, and in this storyline he's needed a Black Lantern ring and a Black Lantern in order to do everything that he really wanted to do in order to ascertain a level of power higher than what he currently has. But unfortunately, he just like flat out fails. And I'm not slouching when I say this Darkseid's crazy powerful. He just one-shots an entire contingency of multiversal, like Justice Leaguers, man. However, it appears that he still has some level of access to the power of the Black Lantern ring, because he bestows it upon somebody else at the end, and then he starts referencing other people that exist out there that are also trying to ascertain this higher level of power that exists out in the Omniverse. And this higher level of power is called the Great Darkness. And Nekron is one of those other people trying to ascertain that level of power, that being the Great Darkness. And so this confirms that Nekron is essentially outside of the source wall and is a threat to the genuine source and or presence that exists out there in the Omniverse at a higher level than anything we've understood before outside of our localized metaverse. This is some wild stuff whenever it comes to like Nekron confirming, I mean, years old theories. But what do you guys think? Tell me what you think of the absolutely terrifying power of Nekron being one of the most dangerous DC villains confirmed in DC's ongoing story from here on out that continues in January 2022. Let me know what you think of the comics in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe below. Thanks, and I'll see you next time, Lanterns. Later.